So far I've just used a tenon saw to cut straight lines down in the vise, so obviously one down here and one down the front there. The next thing I need to do is, obviously on this other piece, that's going to be trickier for me to cut out because it's in the middle. So I can still use my tenon saw to cut straight lines down, but I'm going to need to do something different to get this middle bit out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my tenon saw first of all to do my 2 straight lines down, similar to before. So work half in the vise, half out, make sure it's straight. Using the tenon saw, so on a slight angle, not on the pencil line, just slightly away into the shaded side so you're not cutting too much away. Drag it down on an angle and then across the top of the wood and just cut straight down. Remember, take your time with it, it's not a race, you want it to be accurate. Same on the other side. So you can see there, I've now cut 2 straight lines down, the camera will focus. So 2 straight lines down, and then what I need to do is I need to get a coping saw from a tool cupboard, which is one of these with the red handle and the very fine blade. When you use a coping saw, first of all, can you just check please that the pins are facing straight up on either side and that the blade looks like it's straight when you look at it straight on in front of you. If it's twisted and you're not quite sure, then please put your hand up and ask a member of staff to check it for you. And then what we need to do now, before we start using that coping saw, is you need to do something to your piece of work. So you can see this one that I've got here, and what I'm going to do first of all is I need to divide this square into half. So I'm going to draw a diagonal line from one side across to the other. And once I've done that, remember, all I want you to do is just to cut straight lines down. So rather than cut on a diagonal line, if you turn your work in the vise and pop it in the vise like that and rest your blade there, you should just be able to cut a straight line down using the coping saw. The coping saw is better to use because it's actually got a finer blade than the tenon saw, and it's better to get into difficult areas when you're cutting. So I'm just going to pop that in the vise. Normally you'd have that facing you in the vise there, but I'm having it turned to the camera so you can see. Obviously if you're doing it, it should be the other way around. So I'm just going to pop it in there. Make sure it's a straight line down, so you can see there it's pointing straight down for me to cut down. Tighten your vise up, get your coping saw, and just start, before you start cutting, just make sure that the blade is pointing straight in front of where you stood and not on an angle. Make sure the frame is pointing up to the ceiling and it's not tilted like that. And all you're going to do, you can do 2 hands to hold it just to help you get a steady start on your cutting. Just start to cut straight down. So from one side to the other, and now you can see that half of that square is gone, so I'm just left with that triangle on the bottom half. So the last thing I need to do is I'm going to put it in my vise, and then all I'm going to do is have it facing up in the vise like this, and I'm going to rest my coping saw blade there and cut straight across. So look how I'm holding my coping saw, 2 hands on the handle, blade is pointing that way and it's straight so it's not on an angle. And I'm just going to cut straight across. Now you can see that's actually cut quite well, so when the camera comes into focus you can see it's actually cut. You can still see the pencil line. I've probably got a millimetre more on that side because it's on an ever so slight angle. So what I might want to do is put that back into my vise and just rest my coping saw there and just cut across very finely and just take off that extra millimetre. So to do that, if I just pop it back in the vise and just very, very gently just shave off a tiny little bit that you need to remove. And you can even do that on the sides with your saw if you wanted to. So you can see that looks a little bit better now. And then the trick is, when you've cut it out, when you've taken off as much as you need to, obviously you should keep checking it before you get your saw and take off little bits perhaps. The trick is to push it together like this. Obviously it needs to be a tight fitting joint because if it's too loose, it's not going to work. And you can see there that mine actually fits quite well. I haven't got any gaps. You can see there, obviously there's a little bit there that I might need to sort. And you can see there that it fits quite tight as well. But if it doesn't quite fit, and maybe you need to get rid of a bit, then you can actually get a hand file and you can put it in your vise and you can just file up against the side if you need to, but just be careful when you're filing not to do it on an angle, and keep checking it constantly because you don't want to take too much off. If you do end up with gaps, there's not much you can do about that, so it's better to take off tiny little bits at a time if you do need to, and just keep checking it when you fit it together.